The 30th of April 2022. So today is the 30th of April 2022, getting close to midnight. Make sure to like my official YouTube video, subscribe to my official YouTube channel, and go to my website www.susanmealing.com. And make sure if you're going to leave a comment, please do so with etiquette and respect. And so I'm wearing this corset, and I'm sure you can notice this little white piece. Well, this is what happens when certain boning isn't the correct boning. So I don't deal with substitution types very well, and those types of weaker construction tend to have certain issues. So I'm purposefully doing this right now because those who have seen me more so in Washington State dancing, I've actually broken steel boning. So this right here is a very good example in reference to swimming and why I don't wear bikinis when in the water unless it is considered as a Farmer John wetsuit. Because this, I think I've had this corset for less than maybe about a year as far as actually wearing it. And so I have minimum requirements because I know myself good enough and well enough in comparison to some of those types of people who think that they know me better. Think that they know what I need in comparison to myself knowing what I actually need. Because those types who want to try to listen in and think that that is a better way in comparison to actually speaking with me in person, face-to-face in person, and actually asking me, because that would be the difference between a lecture and a discussion. And so when people assume that it is better to do it that way because of their own biases or whatever their situations are, they tend to get themselves into trouble. I'm sure if you were to think about a few situations. So I was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience on his official YouTube channel with Timothy Pool. Now, Timothy Pool, I don't actually know if I've ever met him. However, there are certain things that, and again, I haven't fully listened to this particular official Joe Rogan Experience YouTube video just yet. However, there's a few factors that kind of have a few correlating points that I could go into. So first and foremost, in the earlier portion of the official Joe Rogan YouTube video, Timothy brings up how he has driven across the country of the United States of America in a van. And it's some sort of having solar panels and it's like a conversion van. From those who remember those from the 1990s, it's like a conversion van from what I picked up from what he described. So it's like, for those who know what a conversion van is. So Mr. and Mrs. Sauer actually had a conversion van, if I remember correctly. So it actually has an eating area, table section, and a pull-out bed area. I don't think it has a shower, at minimum, back when it comes to Mr. and Mrs. Sauer's. I don't remember them having that, but they had a sink and a kitchenette, and it was amazing. I was enthralled by that van. I was like, wow, who knew that that was capable? And it was about the size, it was a little bit bigger than a minivan. It's like a cargo van, but a little bit wider and having all these adaptive sort of stuff. Well, from what they discussed on the Joe Rogan podcast or YouTube, Timothy Pool has this, and he's traveled all across the country, which I wonder if he has noticed certain areas as far as radio signals, and depending on where he's gone and at what time and what the astrological alignments were in the sky at the time. I wonder if he has noticed any certain specific situations occur while he's done that. Now, there's also an irony. Back when I was a child growing up in New Jersey, I had a neighbor who lived across the street named Timothy. And his mom was named Bernadette, his father was named Skip, and his older sister, I think, was named Suzanne. I don't remember ever meeting Suzanne, to be honest. And so she had been in college at the time, from what I remember. And so Timothy had gone to Mass, though. He had actually attended Mass, and I was very upset because he's only a year younger than me. But because of the situations I've already explained through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, and you can go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com. Additionally, in reference to my 3-volume book series, The Adventures of Susan Meeling, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire. With Timothy, though, having been a neighbor across the street, he obviously would know what the Atlantic area of the ocean is at, and it just really is. He would know about Sunny and Sonia, as far as her name, and her husband, Joe Jose. He'd also know about my big blood brother who lived next door, and he'd know about a lot of factors he actually was a part of when I had come up with the idea, let's make a whirlpool in the pool area in the backyard. And so he and Alejandro and his twin brother, I can't remember, and then a few others, they got out of the pool when they couldn't swim anymore, and I was just like, no, I'm not done yet. I want to actually see how strong I can make this water. No, that's fine. And so I actually would hop over as I wanted to make it stronger while they were still assisting to work to make the whirlpool. And then at a certain point, they felt the need to climb out. And it's like, that's fine. I'm not done yet. So I kept going, and then I started testing myself. So when it comes to my scuba diving, where I earned 26 scuba diving certifications, and then where I landed at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, as well as having landed at the bottom of the ocean of someone from my childhood, I know for a fact Timothy would not be surprised. Timothy, Alejandro, and a few others that Sunny Sonia and Nora would babysit, I guarantee you not one of them would be surprised that I would be the one who would land at the bottom of the ocean in the Atlantic. Not one of them, because of having seen me going and doing that in regards of the pool in the backyard. Additionally, in reference to camp and having gone out to Point Pleasant Beach, Seven Presidents Beach, Hither's Beach, those are more common aspects for us and our childhood. Whereas my biological sister wouldn't ever have that experience, mainly because Sunny Sonia didn't like her. Because she was a spoiled brat, and a few other reasons. And so it was as it was. Hypothetically, there could be some people who learned this. I'm not going to assume. I did give warnings throughout the state of Texas after having given warnings in the state of Illinois and having given warnings in the state of New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania. So my biological sister has wished to be more important than she was. My Buckgung and my Buckpoo, which is her great-grandparents, there is a difference. Those who understand that, it's kind of, this is her issue, is because for once in my life-ish, I was the favorite. Because of actually maintaining and sustaining respect. Because of actually, paying attention to detail and not ever really offering to assist. Not saying that I didn't offer, but usually in those times, it was just, I'd see something, I'd take care of it, and if I needed to explain it to someone, I would let them know If not, I would just take care of it and go along. A lot of times, that was one of my favorite, or my Bakgong and Bakpoo's favorite thing that they would talk with me about was they would realize, especially my Bakpoo. My Bakpoo would notice that in comparison, and so when it came to my biological sister having been born, she didn't get the name my Bakpoo had intended for her. Because her middle name is Anne, and my biological mother's name is Anna, there was not the respect. So while some people in the United States of America during the 1980s especially thought that the only way to respect China was through the male, because my biological mother and a few others from the time frame of the 1960s and 1970s actually thought Mao Zedong was amazing. They didn't know anything about Mao Zedong. They didn't know what that guy went through. They didn't know what he dealt with. They didn't know what he overcame. All that they knew was, and you can see it in the hippie stuff, because a lot of the policies that they fought for in the 1960s and 1970s actually align with Mao Zedong's policies of the CCP. They don't actually align with the policies of the United States of America. And my Bakgong and my Bakpoo, who escaped Mao Zedong, had brought up, no. Your biological mother is stupid. She's a round-eye. These are her words, as far as my Bakpoo. Your biological mother is a round-eye. She has no idea who Mao Zedong actually was. Yes, there is a lot to respect, because Mao Zedong had overcome quite a bit and survived. However, it was some of the individuals around Mao Zedong that she's not paying attention to, because they got infuriated as to what occurred, and they had more power, and they just kind of propped up Mao Zedong, because a lot of the situations that Mao Zedong had dealt with in different capacities were what they had dealt with, some more so than others. And so while there are certain benefits in, I guess, certain ways, you have to find a silver lining to a degree, the irony is in the 1960s and 1970s, these people were actually advocating for the policies that Mao Zedong had put forward. They were actually like, yay, Mao Zedong! That's literally what, so they were promoting Marxism, they were promoting Stalinism, they were promoting Mao Zedong. They had no idea in regards to Tiananmen Square when it actually occurred. And realistically, Tiananmen Square wasn't known about until years later. So those who know about how certain, so on the news, in live news, they have like an 8-second delay, for those who don't know. And in reference to that time, well, they didn't really need an 8-second delay because of the way it was. And so it was only because a British individual had been caught behind the lines in China. So however long it took him to actually get out of China, to get to the UK, that was when it was learned. So 1980 is when Tiananmen Square was learned about. Whereas my Bakgong and my Bakpoo had informed me it was not just Tiananmen Square. Tiananmen Square was the only location that was known about. That was it. Tiananmen Square was a small area, and only because this British guy had been there was that particular location known about. That was it. Nowhere else. So it actually, from what my Bakgong and my Bakpoo Poole had explained, it occurred across the entire country of China. It wasn't just one or two locations, it was the entire country because of a multitude of factors. And so just envision when social media comes out, emails, phone calls, as far as the ease of, and all these other things, and these same people who are like, yay, Marxism, yay, Stalinism, which I didn't understand because I knew what the constitutional rights are. And so I dealt with this as a child. And so my biological mother was like, you just don't understand how important that actually was. And it's like, yeah, I think you're projecting. I don't think you understand how important that actually was for you to pay attention to. Especially she was doing information technology in the 1980s and 1990s. So Timothy, who lived across the street, we would hang out on the bus ride to and from Asher Holmes Elementary School. We would play football. He was a bit more sensitive towards some things because, he just was. There wasn't anything wrong with it, it just was. And so he had attended Mass, and when I found out that he was accepted, I was like, well, congratulations. And he didn't know about my invitation. He didn't know that I had taken the tests. He didn't know that I had gone through the interviews. He didn't know any of that. And he was just like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah. I had told him that I had done some of the work to attend. I didn't tell him about how far I had gone. And he was like, so you would have been in Mass when I go? And I said, yeah, but I'm going to St. John Vianney High School right now instead because of my Canna and all that sort of stuff. And he, living across the street, was like, is that why there were Navy whites out in front of your house a bunch of times? And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, yeah, I know what the Navy looks as. And I was like, I like the dress blues because of the Marine Corps. And he's like, yeah, no, those are Navy whites that you were looking at. It was just they had their blue trench coat. And I'm like, now I know what Marine Corps dress blues look as. Their jacket goes to here. And he's like, yeah, there were some of those guys with them too, but I saw them. Those guys were in front of your house arguing with Mike. And I was like, what? He's like, you were supposed to go to Mass? And I was like, I received this. It was weird because I had received a piece of paper that you could print out. Like there was even the little tears on the side for those who remember the printers back then. And I thought it was weird because I was like, my invitation to attend Mass was this thick cardstock. I mean, thick. You could barely, curl this invitation I received. It's that type of cardstock. It's not like cardboard where you just bend it, but it was like poster board that but thicker than that and smaller. And it had this seal stamped in and stuff like that. And I had already met with, Governor Christine Todd Whitman because of my Oceanic poster and stuff like that. And Timothy was like, I remember these guys, they still come, do you know they still come around your house? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, every now and then, because of where his bedroom was, he's like, I look across the street and I see, this random whatever van park off on Yellowknife Road. And I was like, okay. And he goes, and I see them drive down Yellowknife, turn around, they usually park. Do you remember those lights back when we were children? And I was like, you saw them too? And he was like, you saw them? Because my big blood brother and I would talk about what occurred. I didn't know that Timothy had seen them. And so it's funny because I would have talked with Timothy about what I had dealt with as a child. because he had brought up only one or two times where he had noticed they had slowly come in to the area where essentially the model home was, and he heard a bunch of noises, and all of a sudden, like, it was like they were making an escape to get away. And I was like, oh well, it was a situation. It's cool. They learned. And Timothy was like, what do you mean they learned? And I was like, they learned not to mess with stuff. That's all that you need to know. And he was just like, well, what did they learn not to mess with? Timothy, I don't know how to explain this, but maybe something could be just right in front of your face that you just... put 1 + 1 together and get 2. And he was just like, I don't get it. It's okay. It's okay. One day you will. One day you'll do that math and you'll realize. And he was just like, okay, so we talked about how he had gotten into Mass, and he was like, you're actually happy for me? I was like, yeah. I mean, why wouldn't I be? And he was like, I just, because that's just how I am. It's just, if you succeed and you advance, I'm genuinely happy. I'm not the type of person who gets all, like some people, where, I know how competition is. However, in the competitions that I've been in, you just do self-improvement. You don't ever do stuff that knocks the other out because you don't know what you're going to miss out on. That's a viewpoint I've had. So I've studied a lot of history and as I've gone into, and a lot of quotes or books that are about certain people. I've known about certain quotes and was just really reminded in reference to after waking up from my coma after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, from when I was in basic training, more so years later as far as some of the quotes that I remember reading about in different books, the libraries. And so one famous quote that I really paid attention to, especially where I grew up attending church, was, the most amount of lost information or lost ideas is in a cemetery, and depending on how the cemetery takes care of its grounds, shows you what type of people they are. And so, for those who know, I attended Old Tenet Presbyterian Church. It's a square-mile cemetery. And so there were the facts I brought forward regarding how Old Tenet Presbyterian Church in the early 1990s, late 1980s, found out that there was a way that they could have the church registered in the Historical Society of the state of New Jersey. Now, back in the 1980s and 1990s, compared to now in 2022, you didn't have the electronic forms. So where a lot of stuff now is a 60 or 90 or 120 days before certain things, back then, the state of New Jersey essentially had up to, I think it was 3 or 5 years to get back to you because of the paperwork. Because it was all done by hand in comparison. And so, there was the board meeting as to how to speed it along. How to make it easier. And I had brought up, where I've already gone over this, how I got made fun of as far as the center aisle and everything like that, and a bunch of the congregants and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, why would you actually want to do this? Like, isn't there a way to just verify without desecrating anything? Isn't there a capacity to do that instead of what you people are looking at doing? Because you think that it's not that big of a deal because you want a piece of paper. And someone said something like, well, it's an actual plaque. Yeah, okay, cool. Except for the fact that you're literally going to go against General George Washington's orders. So I am warned in a lot of capacities, which I had told Timothy about. So, I'd see him on the bus because we went to the same elementary school. So I'd sit on the bus and he'd be like, "How was your weekend?" I was like, "Well, why don't you talk about yours instead?" Which those who know me, it's one thing, or have known me in person, face-to-face in person. Usually, for the most part, it's like, well, I'd ask how they're doing, what's going on, and only if certain things, it's like, yeah, well, why don't we just talk about what you want to talk about in comparison, because I don't really want to go into that, because I don't really want to go into it. And so Timothy, having been at the same babysitter that I went to, having been only 1 year younger than me, and living across the street and all that sort of stuff, he knew how I was when it came to certain things. He knew how Mike was, he knew how Anna was, and he definitely knew how Patricia was. There wasn't any hiding that. He knew how Patricia's friends were. He was in Asher homes longer than I was with my biological sister. He knew how that went. Certain other ones, such as Chris Angarone, knew. Daniel Schleifstein knew how that was when it came to my biological sister and all the stuff that she would stir up. All these different needless drama situations because she thought that the only way she could ever get attention was stirring up needless drama. Well, in the Joe Rogan Experience official YouTube channel with Timothy Pool, they are, where I'm at in the video, they're discussing the rage news or the staged news. And that's the exact same garbage that my biological sister would do because of what they call clickbaits, whereas at that point it was more along the lines of they just wanted attention. They wanted to feel special because in reference to my biological sister, she just didn't ever want to do anything that actually required effort. So anything that actually required effort on her part, she didn't want to do because of her laziness. She wanted an easy whatever, and I warned her as a child, I guarantee that's going to come around and bite you, because if you want to do things the easy way, there is always a cost. Don't ever think that doing it the easy way ever translates in that positive way. What it translates, and I told her this, what it translates to is in the shortest of shortest term, sure, you might get that little bit of attention. In the actual short term, oh, you'll get attention. You're not going to like the short-term attention. In the long-term attention, you are not going to be happy with that because it's even more difficult. And then in the longest term, before the longest term, you will have the knowledge and understanding that that is permanent. Period, and end of story, no matter what. And so for the rest of your entire legacy into eternity will be that. So either you make the correct choices, albeit how difficult it might be. In the short term, it might be difficult. In the long term, into the longest terms, it'll be better for you, but you actually have to have that knowledge. And she didn't believe me. So with what they're talking about as far as that's concerned, Timothy, Daniel, and Christopher, among Adam and Ronnie and Megan and Monica, there were a lot of people in the neighborhood. They all knew how my biological sister was. And there were times where some people in the neighborhood tried to blame me until I clarified the difference, and then it was, oh yeah, that's right. You have that as a little sister. And it's like, yeah, I'd like to say don't remind me, but since I had to remind you, well, yeah. And there was a point in time where I was actually talking with Ronnie, I think it was Valerie, and then Adam and Megan, if I remember correctly, and we're all walking in the neighborhood, and they had brought some stuff up, and I'm like, no, that's Patricia. And they're like, no, she has brunette hair. And I look, and at that time, of course, I'm like, yeah, we are biologically related. And they're like, yeah, but she had whatever, and it's like, yeah, well, what was the height? And so at that time, in comparison to now, so she was much shorter, and I'm like, so yeah, that's my biological sister compared to me, unless you think I'm gonna walk around like this everywhere I go. And so, it's only for Sailor Moon, okay? And so, and they were just, well, and so it was a constant reminder, because it's like, yeah, no, don't blame me for what Patricia did, blame Patricia for what Patricia did. Don't blame me for what Mike did, go blame Mike for what Mike did. Don't blame me for what Anna did, go blame Anna for what Anna did. Don't blame me for what other people did, go blame them, which is essentially the precursor, but the exact same time of, and translates into now in the year 2022, of Ronald Reagan's quote, when he was President of the United States of America. We as a society must not blame society for the lawbreaker. Go blame the lawbreaker in comparison to blaming everybody else. And you can even see that when it comes to the after effects, well, mainly my head injury itself. Now, there are situations outside of that where I do have the right to be upset regarding other factors in comparison to my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, but there are certain parts where, yes, I would not be surprised if, in regards of my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister, because Timothy had brought up how he had literally seen Mike get in the face of these guys from the Navy and actually balk up to the Navy. He didn't know, meaning Timothy didn't know, that I had been invited to Mast at the time. And even when we discussed it, it was just one of those, yeah, I go to St. Anthony High School, so, that's how that went. And so, but he had brought up how there were multiple, I think he said it was either 2 or 3 times per week, that Timothy would actually see Navy guys at the house, whether driving the property or going on the property to go speak with either Mike and or Anna. And so it was a huge issue, and it's like, well, I don't know what to say. And so after a certain point in time, you even have to take in consideration my Taekwondo instructor, or sensei. I think he was having to do something with the Navy only because of some of the insignia that I had seen in his office area, but it wasn't like he had like a huge Navy flag or anything. In the shelving behind his chair at his desk, he just had these little, like, for those who know, the coin racks. So those little circle coin racks, he had those for those who know military coins. And then he had like an American flag, and it had some, shinies on it. And then he had a few other things that just had a bunch of military stuff. And it's like, so I don't know what he did as employment. Though he was ecstatic that I had gotten to the level that I had in comparison. And so when you take that in consideration, as well as Governor Christine Todd Whitman and Mast, you have that to take in consideration. But yeah, Timothy and I, we would talk about that, and it's like, yeah, well, as far as certain things in the neighborhood, because that's what children do. I don't know what parents think, but children do talk. You put a bunch of children together, and they do that. It's probably similar to adults. If you put a bunch of adults together, they might talk. I don't know. I don't want to assume. I don't know. Possibly, if you put teenagers together, that might happen too. Who knows? I can say from seeing the Joe Rogan official experience video, him and Timothy Pool, they talked, so that's just 2 people. Imagine what could happen with more than 2 people. Like, for example, a school bus. Who would ever think that could occur? Probably anybody that has common sense. that's what we did. That's probably what other people have done too. Yet again, I can't be the only one. And so he had gotten into mast and stuff like that, and I was like, well, you're gonna go do something. And he was like, well, what would I do? Well, once you graduate from mast, you're gonna have certain advantages. Congratulations. Make sure you correctly use them. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm really upset about not getting into mast, but, congratulations. And he was just, what? What do you mean, mast? You have no idea, do you? You have no idea what mast actually is. And he's like, it's a school with a Navy attachment. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you'll learn. You will learn. Yeah. It's literally in the name. Marine, so like marine biology. Science, which biology is a science, but there's a few other factors in science. Technology, duh. And then you have the Navy attachment. Hello? And he was like, that's different. That's just, and it's like, one day you'll grow up and you'll realize how accurate I am. And he was just, no, it's just vast. And it's like, it's far more than that, like by a lot. And so it was as it was, but he had brought up from the time frame of 1996 all the way up until just before we moved in 1998, which Mike and Anna did this now in 2008 after the situation, as far as General or Major General or Brigadier General, or no, it was Major General Gilman's office. That whole situation with the soldiers that had just gotten back on U.S. soil from Iraq, that whole thing, those three guys and stuff like that, and Major General Gilman, and that situation, that, temper tantrum that he threw, that, he didn't pay attention to, details correctly, but, those types and those ways and that aspect of, because why would a two-star general ever use his two eyes correctly? I could just go and quote as far as Pastor Mackenzie, you got two eyes and two ears and one mouth. Maybe you should learn how to focus that correctly instead of that arrogance in between your ears as far as what's inside your cranium just because you got stags. Not that this is why I didn't want to go in as an officer, because I don't want to deal with the political types that, those types. And so there are those who know what I have as far as that. And so it is as it is. And so, but then you'd think that he would actually have appreciation for the fact that I kicked him out of his own office if he had any intelligence, but, that would require someone who wasn't a pogue and that actually did work to actually understand that, because there are certain types that, and okay, I was just going to be logistics and I didn't graduate basic training, yet my clearance background for what I was cleared to do, it's not like that type of logistics would actually be where I'm just in an office and doing nothing except for paperwork. That type of logistics with that type of clearance for that particular MOS field with that clearance, again, I didn't graduate basic training. That's not a type of logistics that somebody that just is allowed to go to logistics would have. I don't know what some people think in regards of whichever branch or division or MOS. Just as there are different levels of each and every type, so take infantry and cavalry and combat arms and MPs, they have different levels of those guys. And so at the age of 17, I had that clearance background. So, there are different levels of logistics. And so those guys with those types of backgrounds, they have to get their gear from someone. And it's, It's kind of a certain type, depending on their job, as far as what they're going to go out and do. And so. So unlike a two-star general of a base who just stays in his office and only goes to meetings, and constantly wears his, class A's or has to have his BDUs pressed a certain way for those who understand that type. The types that get their head covers dry cleaned. I mean, I did, I'll acknowledge that, but then, it was as it was because I liked the way the visor. That was my thing because I could get the visor a certain way, but there's just certain factors some people understand. And so other than that, the top part I didn't really mind being a little whatever, but the visor, that was my thing. I had everybody who wears a uniform, you know how it is. There is always something that is just, even though it's a uniform, you do something that's just, that's just yours. And it just is as it is. And so, but yeah, there's that, and then of course, why would a two-star ever pay attention to the fact of, it was past 30 days, as far as that policy regarding that. And so, I mean, there are guys with certain backgrounds that understand, that particular situation regarding those three guys, which, Major General Gilman being that type, of course, wouldn't have the slightest inclination what that actually translates to because of that pogue factor. And so while some people have, been upset by the terminology of pogue, it's usually a pogue who gets upset by that. It's kind of like, well, why be mad? Why don't you like the truth? And it's like, but I do this amount of paperwork. Yeah, that paper cut got you, didn't it? Yeah, compared to stuff out in whatever, that paper cut, if you knew the pain of the paper cut. Yep. Yeah. Must have been so scary to see that little itty bitty piece of paper, that little itty bitty drop of blood. Yeah, that's just so scary. I wanted to do that in Gilman's office so badly when he was doing certain things, so I'm going to pause real quick on this. I have to, because I can. So, when, Major General Gilman did his little titty baby temper tantrum before I kicked him out of his office for the meeting that he had arranged for the three guys, the colonel and his two aides that came over from Iraq after being on soil in the United States of America for less than 7 days, and that whole Bronze Star situation. When, before that, internally, in my thoughts, when, he had called me what he had, it was like, yeah, if you're going to be upset about my words right now, if you actually knew my thoughts, I'll tell you right now did that little piece of paper hurt your, not only did that piece of paper hurt your little finger, and probably that little drop of blood was probably so scared. What did you tell? Why did you tell me that little bit of trouble? You wonder why these guys are the way they are. Because of having to deal with types such as yourself, going and being a whiny little, pampered little whatever. You probably should go running around in a diaper and you're just whiny. But you know what? There's paper in a diaper and you might get a paper cut. Pulling up your pampers and stuff. These were thoughts. And so, and then after the three male situation and I stayed as calm as I could. I didn't throw that much of a temper tantrum. I did just, go and say, okay, I'm going to sell the house and we're moving because I'm not dealing with certain factors because this little whiny little temper tantrum throwing whatever, I don't have patience for. I literally saved his life, and he's not the type, because he's a pogue, he doesn't actually know what that means, so he's going to go and throw a little bitch fit because he doesn't actually know what it is to be a man in the correct ways, because he's one of those who doesn't even realize it, because, he thinks that somebody who gets him a Band-Aid is someone who's actually going to assist him in comparison to guys who actually do stuff. And so he has no idea what it actually is to be in the field in comparison. And granted, I didn't graduate basic training. I acknowledge that. And no, I didn't grow up watching a lot of military movies, because guess why? In the lecture, they were above G rated. So just for that clarification. And so, it was just common sense and hanging out with General George Washington's spirit as far as I was concerned. So, it was as it was. And so it's just one of those, when it came time to it, plus a few other situations, because my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister needed to understand I didn't want them at my house. I purposefully moved partially because I didn't want them involved in my life the way they were. It's like, seriously. You're not assisting, except the fact that I don't want, need, or desire you to be doing certain things. You weren't assistive at the time, you caused a bunch of needless drama, a bunch of people dealt with a bunch of problems because of your types, so just stop. And so they would show up to Carrollton randomly. This is how they didn't even schedule it with me. There were times they literally just showed up. It's like, why are you here? Why are you at my, what part of, I literally move 4.5 hours away and you still show up? What part of that don't you understand? At what level do you get it through your skull that I don't want you in my life? Even so, it wasn't enough to be in the city of San Antonio. It's like, go away. You're not as helpful as you think you are. And again, 4 scariest words or whatever, stay out. They just, ew. And don't try to cover up what you did as far as mast is concerned, because that's just proving each and every time, because of what Timothy said, each and every time you show up just proves what Timothy said. As far as how the Navy and the Marines were at the house. You showing up proves those legalities. Stay out. I wanted to go. Because I didn't want to deal with you. Yes, you are that bad. Yes, you are. There's proof of that. And so, but Timothy back in the 1980s and 1990s, he was like, he knew. I mean, he watched when it came to certain things and what was he going to be capable to do at that time. And so we talked about stuff like that. And when it came to the stuff at Little Tenet Presbyterian Church, one day, get on the bus at school, and he's like, oh, how did church go? I don't want to talk about it. Oh, well, what happened? No, I don't want to talk about it. No, because I know you, so if you say you don't want to talk about it, yeah, but I don't want to talk about it. And so when I get to a certain point, if you push, you learn not to. Because if I say no, and you push, you're going to get hurt. You either do it in a respectful etiquette way, or I'm going to hurt you. And so Timothy, he kept pushing, and then I hurt his feelings. And for 3.5, 4 weeks, we didn't talk. Because it was that much where it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I just didn't know what happened. I said I didn't want to talk about it. So if you push, don't complain that I respond the way I do. Because if I say I don't want to talk about something, it translates to I don't want to talk about something. So respect that. Otherwise, I'm going to hurt your feelings. At the very teeniest, tiniest part. Again. And so, 3.5, 4 weeks, he sat at a different part of the bus. And he was just, I'd get on the bus, and he'd just be like, it's like, shh, I told you don't push me. Don't make me hurt your feelings again. Don't push me. If I say no, no means no. And so later, after I calmed down, and he had come around, he's like, hey, you wanna talk about what happened at church? And by then, there were a couple of meetings about the historical aspects of the registration paperwork. This is before they actually got to the point of discussing the casket in the center aisle and all that sort of stuff. And so told Timothy about it, and he was like, they want to do what? Do they know how bad that is? They don't care. Well, in 1990 or 1991, they actually did it. The whole thing, they, did the whole situation where they moved that. And they caused a bunch of needless problems, and then 1993 occurred. Now, if some people find that to be a coinky-dink, that less than a year and a half from the time frame that they chose to not pay attention to details, as far as leaving things where they should be, and not doing what they did. I mean, I brought up the inscriptions, I brought up the stuff and all that, what have you, well, okay, congratulations, you got a plaque. None of you are going to be around for it, as far as any of that, because this is what's going to happen. And I had already gone over my nightmare and stuff like that, which, yeah, if you take in consideration, second or third grade, I think it was third grade actually, is when they started actually talking about that. So in second grade, I'm having this nightmare, they bring it up at church, and then 1993 attack occurs, and because Mike and Anna were upset that I took a stand against that, because they thought that that was going to be a good idea, it's like, no. Don't you ever consider yourselves that way ever again. Because you don't care. You're just, you don't pay attention to details. And so I dealt with at the house how, oh, we're going to be part of something bigger than we are. No, you're not. I mean, you are, yes, in the wrong capacity. And so because I took a stand against that, I dealt with what I dealt with. Patricia was like, you just don't understand how cool it is. And it's like, except you're not paying attention to the ramifications. You have let me explain to you, if you do not respect the dead, how could you ever respect the living? And so then 5th grade. And so for those who understand that, and Timothy knew about that. Of course he did, because we used to hang out on the bus. And so by the time of 5th grade, when I returned back to school, he was like, hey, how are you doing? And it's like, I'm still, like, the sooner I can get rid of Mike, Anna, and Patricia out of my life, the better. Yeah, the sooner that I cannot have to deal with them in my life, in any capacity, in any way, in any shape, in any form, anything. And anybody that's like friendly with them, each and every day, the sooner I don't have to deal with that, the better. Yeah, maybe one day I'll actually be in a good mood. Until then, I'll, do what I can. But until then, until I don't have to deal with it in any capacity, in any capacity at all, nothing, I just don't see where I'll actually have that much enjoyment. And Timothy was like, that's kind of like, and because he knew, he was just like, that's kind of sad. And it's like, well, as soon as they finally accept the fact that I don't want to be a part of them, I don't want to deal with this, I don't want to deal with that, I'm not what they want me to be, because I'm not what they want me to be, once they come to actually accept that, and like stay out of my stuff, if they want to actually assist, then they have to accept the fact that it's only by my terms and not by theirs. And so Timothy was like, wow, I thought I had issues with, because at that time his mom and dad were going through certain things. And he's like, I thought I was bad with that. Wow. I was like, yeah. And he had seen, him and my big blood brother had seen how Anna was when I get picked up from Sunny Sonia's house. He wasn't the only one. Alejandro saw that, his twin brother saw that, some of the other children that were babysat, and it was one of those, yeah, well, it is what it is. That's what I deal with, and not that I just stand there and take it, because I fight back if I have to, I'll do as I have to, but it is what it is. And so situations were as they were, and so Timothy was just like, I don't really think someone doing certain things certain ways is the best way to go, but you know what, in your situation, I don't see where you could ever have Mike, Anna, and or Patricia involved in your life in any capacity where you'd ever actually enjoy life. Like, I actually agree with you that even if they were at a distance and they tried to involve themselves, you would still sense it. And I was like, and I'd be pissed. And it would only push them further away. It wouldn't ever be where I'd ever want to get to know them at all. And I told this to Timothy, my biological sister could have a child and I would condemn that child. Just because. I wouldn't care. I have no care or concern. If she were to try to list me as a godmother, I'd let it go. I wouldn't care. And Timothy was like, but certain, and this is when we're children, and so we were in middle school at the time, so he was in 7th grade and I was in 8th grade. And he was like, well, and I was like, no, I have the sight. And so, because we talked obviously throughout, and I know I'm bouncing around, but it was one of those, if my biological sister ever does anything to cause me any needless problems after I become a biological adult, I will not save her child or children. I will do exactly what my buck Poole said needed to be done to her. I don't care. You can't make me. And Timothy was like, I don't know what your buck Poole said, but like, I kind of got chills up my spine, and it's like, that's nice. That's nice. I have no problems, because I will not tolerate it. There's nothing in any capacity at all. Because if it was well, you have to or else this, well, there would be an accident. Just however it would be. Because I don't have any capacity I have no way to ever look at that with any care. I don't care. And he was like, that's really cold. And it's like, yeah. And with what I've dealt with just up to this point in time, if it doesn't change, I guarantee you it will get colder. Guarantee it. 100% guarantee it. And so he was just like, I believe you. I believe you would. And I'm like, Because you are not going to do certain things and then try to, especially now when you take in consideration the merger stuff. Flat out. Like, for example, I didn't ever ask my biological mother or my biological father or my biological sister to get involved with my website, my work, my modeling, anything of any capacity, any of my books. I specifically actually told them to not do so. I did this in person, face-to-face in person, for years in the state of Texas. From 2003 is when it started. It went, and there were multiple times where we stopped speaking. And it was only because some male was like, well, maybe, and then it was, you know what, you obviously knew Mike, Anna, and Patricia. You were doing things on their behalf. I don't want to ever fucking have a part of that. No. And so, any male that I might date, you're going to accept the fact that I don't want to have a part of that. Because it's my right. After what I have dealt with, it is my right. My work, my experiences, my copyrights, my life. Literally in the Constitutional Rights and Amendments, Civil American War, as far as that's concerned, I mean, there is no excuse, cause, or reason. I've been dealing with this for decades. There are certain laws that have been supposed to be in truth in comparison to what I've dealt with needlessly. So no means no. I've already said no time and time again. I've had the right to. Those people lied to the Marine Science and Technology School with the Navy attachment. That's back in 1996. So they, as far as the move from New Jersey to Illinois, I didn't even find out that the house was on the market at that point in time. Didn't even know we were going to move. Until literally the day of my Sweet 16. That was when I learned we were moving to Illinois. Nope. So when it came to the stuff as far as my house in San Antonio, I just went through the company that I did and I was gone. And those people showed up to my house and get out of my life. Like, what part of that? And so it literally is where the, mast has been like, no, we actually will. So I had a set of swimming instructors that wanted me to train for the butterfly when I was a child in elementary school. Okay, all you gotta do is take a look at my martial arts regarding Taekwondo, as far as that's concerned. So those people, were it because Patricia couldn't? Well, you know what, how about you accept the fact that we're two different people? Once you accept the fact that we're two different people, you can accept that fact. It's not my fault that she doesn't live up to certain standards. That's her fault for being too lazy because all she wants to do is ride on someone else's coattails. Well, go find a male, ride his coattail, leave me alone. Instead. And don't bother me, by the way, either. Not interested. And so it was a continuous situation, needlessly, literally for decades. And so, but at that time, Timothy, neighbor across the street, he was just like, and this is when we were children, he was like, I hope that you are capable to find a way to fully get them away from you permanently, and where they cannot ever bother you or cause you any problems ever. And each and every person that is like them, similar to them, or associated with them doesn't ever do anything to ever cause you any problems and actually assist you in the correct ways. That was the first time somebody actually said that to me, or anything remotely close to that, for my entire life by then, and I was in middle school. I was like, I hope so too. Because this sort of stuff is ridiculous. And so, but yeah, as far as what they discussed on the official Joe Rogan Experience YouTube channel, as far as I've heard, Timothy Pool has gone across the United States of America. Well, Timothy, my neighbor from childhood, and babysitter stuff and at multiple schools, and having gone to Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment, I guesstimate that those two would be capable to discuss certain things as far as additionally, there's my Medal of Honor, our project trips, having seen a bunch of stuff, and yeah, it is a certain capacity where there are certain realities as to the work I personally have to do. It's an energetic process. It's not just at the actual location. It is literally constant work from the time that I initially begin. So the energetic work that I personally have to do literally is at the starting point officially when I get the names of what I gotta go work on. That's the starting point. I don't finish work until it is a completed piece, which takes over a year and a half for just one. So individuals that are like, oh, well, it's a hypothetical regarding my Medal of Honor art project trips, yeah, no, there's protocol. If you don't follow protocol, you cause me needless harm, needless damage, because of that sort of garbage where it's similar to the way Patricia and those references, because of that sort of stuff. This is why, in regards of what the show was supposed to be called as far as guardian assholes, yeah, you actually have to speak with me. I don't care that I'm a biological female. If you don't respect the fact that you have to actually do as I tell you, that lets you know how sexist you are. That's realistically what it is when it comes to the people of that show. Because if they decided, oh, well, we'll do it our way, you literally, by that choice, show your sexism. Show your bigotry as far as that's concerned, because I am a biological female. So if you don't follow the fact that you have to go by my standards, because I know the protocol, you, in turn, are being a sexist. Because if, in regards of, so what, I didn't graduate basic training. You don't know my background at that time in the year 2015 or 2016. So even if you had the teeniest of tiniest of itsiest of bitsiest knowledge in regards of finding a silver lining, that's exactly it. How much have I explained in updates from the year 2019 to now in 2022? That was not known. Well, that lets you know how much work I was actually doing. So in that reference of those types of people, the same garbage in reference to Old Tenet Presbyterian Church where they wanted to do things their way because they wanted their clout. Well, look at what occurred. It could be a complete coinkydink that 1993 at the World Trade Center occurred, as well as it could be a complete coinkydink that a few other situations in the United States of America occurred because those people wanted to have a historical plaque. They wanted their special in comparison to just actually allowing the process to go through in the ways of, because they were impatient. They were too lazy to actually allow the paperwork to go in the capacity of. They wanted to be a part of something that they knew was only going to take a little, well, you know what, here's the irony. Because in 1993, it took longer. They didn't get that plaque until 2001. There's their commemoration that they can take into consideration as far as that congregation. Because I told them not to. I warned them repeatedly throughout the years. And a bunch of those people who claimed to be Christian, who claimed to believe in religion, who claimed to believe in spirituality, those people literally sign after sign after sign after sign. So then there's my Medal of Honor Art Project trips. And so then there's the modern day book, as far as that's concerned. Just to that hypothetical. And so I guess some people could take in consideration however that is, as far as that reality, because again, if it's a bunch of males in the military capacity, veterans, like, Well, she didn't graduate basic training. What does she know? A lot more than you think I do, is the answer in this lecture. If it was a bunch of females in that regard, yeah, what type of female were you in the military, if that's the capacity? You know, I mean, and it depends. Because, you know, it also goes into intention. Because, you know I'm going to go and take care of this. You could actually just do things in an etiquette and respectful way where you just ask me. You don't have anybody else to ask. It's no different than my scuba diving and those types of people that go in another direction in comparison to the one and only person to ask. Common sense. But here's the thing, I don't want to talk about it. Because I don't have a reason to. See, that's the other thing. If I don't have a reason to, then I don't have a reason to. And I don't. I don't have a genuine reason that I would ever find valid to actually discuss or lecture in regards of what I personally dealt with. You can whatever, as far as the minimal stuff, as far as the adventures of Susan Meeling's Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, those 3-volume books. Otherwise, I don't really care to discuss each and every one. Didn't want to begin with, and the common sense of actually asking me back then, instead of the needless problems I dealt with, which ironically was in the same year of having gone to a will and trust lawyer. Yeah, my free will, not theirs, boys. Don't claim that my son and my daughter should trust you, because what was there to trust? Obviously, that would actually prove otherwise, because what is the problem when it comes to? Because I did go and get stuff taken care of. Let that will and trust lawyer know that, yes, I got insurance and all this sort of stuff. What type? Because of how I physically look in the Carrollton, Texas area in 2008 and 2009. And now the merger. My work is my work. Those types of so-called will and trust types where they claim to have the best interests. How many trust fund babies have been told how special they are by those types of lawyers? How many needless problems have occurred because of those types of lawyers getting involved with stuff that wasn't for them to get involved with? Because similar to that type of Mike, Anna, and Patricia, more so Patricia, of wanting to feel special when they're not. It's that living vicariously through situation. The lawyer I met with, he actually told me, don't you know how nosy we are? I said, actually, yeah, I do. I know exactly how nosy your types are. I know exactly what your types do, too. Born and raised in New Jersey. And so, this is the state of Texas. And yeah, I'm going to get into scuba diving. Yeah, I got this insurance. I want to make sure that, and take this how you will. No. I see a lot of situations in regards to the state of Texas that needs to be taken care of correctly. So yeah. And so this lawyer, this male, he's like, do you know what we, and it's like, yeah, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I've seen your type before. And he was like, oh, I'm sure. I was like, yeah, I have. Your type caused a lot of problems for some of my friends. Yeah. Some of my friends, they had dealt with some needless problems because of your type of lawyers. Yeah, yeah. And so you're in the state of Texas, huh? And he went on and on about, yes, and the I live in the wall of all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you are the type that have certain types thinking that they're more special than they are. Yeah, and you're the type who convinces your type to do certain things that you know are illegal. And you want to try to utilize certain things, and you know what? There's going to be a day where that comes out and you don't have any umbrella protection for that. Because if you encourage that, in comparison, you're held accountable for that. Yeah, yeah, because you can't endanger a minor. But, as a will and trust lawyer, you tend to do certain things. And, I'm doing what I can to actually protect my son and my daughter. But, and he had brought up, well, there's a whole bunch of, and this is literally what he said. He got all excited. This is why I responded as I have. He goes and says, yeah, right now, well, there's the Iraq war and Afghanistan war. Yeah, you're a worshiper of death, aren't you? And he said, well, as a will and trust law firm, no, that's fine, go ahead. Yeah, no, that's fine. In USAA, they do certain things, unfortunately, though, because of certain other factors. I have to look at this. And so, USAA does a lot of stuff. And he was like, what's USAA? Oh, you'll learn. And so, so this is a different time than what you're thinking. And he was like, oh, well, there's going to be all sorts of situations, right? Because you're medically retired from the Army, so you know that there's all this stuff going on in the world as far as the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Yeah, there is. And all these guys are coming back, and I've driven by the DFW National Cemetery. I bet you have. I bet you have. I wouldn't be surprised. And he was, yeah, and he starts going into all these details. See, I don't know if you know that stuff has been a problem regarding certain types where, they think that having a law firm such as you actually covers them. You've been giving them a false impression. Really have. You've been giving them an impression that for certain things that they're covered, and they're not. What would it be if it became in the civilian sector what your type have been doing? And he was like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, who was voted into office? He said, oh, you probably really are excited that he said Obama. I was like, I actually voted for McCain and Palin. And he went, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, I did. And he was just, so you voted not for the first black president? Nope. No, I'm about life. Yeah. Sure am. Yeah, I sure am. And he's like, well, that universal health care, that'll be great. Especially for your type, except not. And he was like, what do you mean? Oh, well, you don't understand how that actually goes, do you? And he had his issues, and it was, yeah, no. See, that, if it goes through, your type of law firm goes out of business. Because, it's not the same regarding that. So instead of certain situations of needless drama problems, those types that you have influenced to do certain things, well, that's where that goes. And you don't really want that, I promise. But if you push for it, well, and this is before 2010 regarding Austin, and 2011 regarding Austin. And so this will and trust lawyer went on and on and on. It was, yeah, so I only give permission for what my choices are. And he was like, well, this makes it where your son and your daughter, no. As long as but see, here's the thing, I also have the right to retract it. And so if I retract it, which I did officially retract it, you don't have any rights to my son or my daughter. So, by the time of, I think it was shortly after Cozumel, I had informed that will and trust law firm that I had retracted their allowances, fully removed them. And that particular will and trust lawyer didn't like it. Said, I don't care. Well then, I went to the Vandenberg and stuff like that, and it was as it was. But yeah, I fully retracted any allowance from that will and trust. So my son and my daughter were no longer involved with that by official standards. Not that that person ever had my son and my daughter's best interests in mind. Because that's the mistake about will and trust lawyers. They don't actually have their client's best interests in mind. Their payments are through the interest payments of the bank. So if they don't have that, they have to stir up needless drama so that way they could get those interest payments from their clients. But if their clients learn how to actually maintain their own bank accounts, will and trust lawyers go to extinction. That's just as it is. And so, as I was listening to the official Joe Rogan Experience and stuff like that, and so I've had some situations and was dealing with certain stuff during my Medal of Honor art project trips, which I didn't ever give permission for anybody because what would be required is actually following protocol. And there hasn't been anybody that's ever asked me in person, face-to-face in person, what protocol would be. Because that's a requirement for discussion. And so I don't, and I haven't ever written down protocol. I don't and haven't ever gone over those details. Because after what I saw and grew up with, as far as those types regarding Old Tenet Presbyterian Church and what occurred the way it did, I just wasn't willing to take that risk. Because I'm about life. And so if in that capacity of wishful thinking regarding that will and trust law firm that had been fired back in the year of 2009 in the month of July in 2009, they were fired. So there's the irony of Cat's Eye, the second session of that particular movie. And so, you know, when you earn things on your own that are non-transferable, those will and trust lawyers, they get so upset because, well, they can't have it. It's not for them at all. Though they try to stir up needless drama, they usually get other clients, which is actually illegal. See, there are laws that are in other insurance companies that, you know, because law firms have to have a version of insurance. And so those who know something such as Prudential. So, will and trust lawyers, it is illegal for them to actually get their clients to do certain things on purpose to interact with other clients of theirs. But a lot of trust fund babies don't talk about who their will and trust firms are through. I guarantee you, if a bunch of trust fund babies were to speak with one another and ask about their little trust fund whatevers, and they were to find which ones are interconnected, because let's also be honest, as far as certain things regarding law firms, it is actually illegal by the insurance standards for those who didn't know. It is illegal for those will and trust lawyers to actually interact in any capacity of regarding their clients interacting with another client. Whether it's in their own law firm and or another, because it's conflict of interest is the term. And so when will and trust type lawyers want to keep the finances in a certain capacity, they do what they can to, in a sneaky way, get those trust fund babies to be in a relationship with one another. Whether or not they get along, whether or not they see eye to eye, whatever of whatever capacity. Because they don't actually care about life. Well, except for what they can buy for themselves. With their trust fund babies' money. That's how that goes. Instead of earning things on their own. Because their moral and ethical codes are where they're supposed to actually be for the best interest of their clients, not them. That's not their job, but they try because they're those who know how those types of lawyers are. But in the insurance paperwork, it is actually a violation of their insurance company policy. If they have any way where they send someone or they themselves do anything in any capacity to ever intermingle or involve themselves with their client's life, they are not allowed to actually do certain things, because legally the only thing they are allowed to do by the insurance policy standard is when the trust fund baby shows up and says, I want this information, they get the information. They are legally not allowed to make any recommendations, because it's the equivalent of, in a different reference, insider trading in regard to the stock market. It's the equivalent of that type of a metaphor, legally. So, for example, if they, as a will and trust, know that one of their other trust fund babies has a company and the stock and whatever, illegally, if they bring that up, it is literally considered insider trading. So I know that back in the 1990s, as far as Enron was concerned, there were also some stock issues. Well, that's where it comes from. It's these will and trust lawyers, where these will and trust lawyers go and do this stuff within there, and that's actually where the insider trade, it's literally insider trading. And so with the technological records, far as that's concerned. There's all those technological records. And so, for decades, this has been going up. And so trust fund babies that just are like, well, I have so much money and I can do whatever, and who cares, and, sure. These will and trust lawyers. Well, this is what they do. And only if something comes up that's whatever, do they go and contact their trust fund baby. But they do it in a way where they pretend that it was, I just found it. It's amazing, I just found it. When in reality, they have been a needless problem from the start. Because that's just how they are. They are the epitome of vultures, but at the very minimum, vultures actually do something worthwhile. They actually clean things up and do things to assist the environment and life in comparison to this. In my opinion, though, it's my opinion. Truly is. It's truly my opinion regarding that. But I also have the bias of being born and raised in New Jersey and having known a few people that those trust fund babies, where they only had those will and trust lawyers constantly feeding them garbage, because that's just how they are. They don't actually care. They know how to schmooze and do whatever. And here's the thing, if a will and trust lawyer ever takes you out, well, guess who's actually paying for it? If you, as a trust fund baby, think that when they pull out their whatever, that no. That's taken from your own account. I would guesstimate, if you were to go and do the research and do your own internal audit, I guarantee you, I promise, you would find some stuff along those lines. I made attempts to warn people I knew, and especially Manalapan, especially Marlboro, and people were like, no, it's like, no, I saw that guy is whatever, and yeah, that's the law firm. I'm telling you, that guy was speaking with that guy, and I let the kids know, and they were like, no, I'll ask my parents. Go ask. I promise you, that is the same whatever. That's non-consensual at all, in every capacity. Completely non-consensual. So, in reference to what was going on at those times regarding my son, my daughter, and I, so if that will and trust lawyer, who had already been fired, by the way, to my scuba diving and stuff, I already fired him, had gotten upset because I landed at the bottom of the ocean and surfaced alive, and temper tantrums, and then needlessly contacted other people that I didn't ask them to. They had already been fired. And then those people, and they were fired. Over and over again, that law firm was fired. They stirred up needless drama. They already had been fired. So what is the recourse on that? Because then, my son and my daughter, as far as McCoy Elementary School, that law firm was fired. So why would there be any involvement? As far as international scuba, that law firm was fired. But if you're accustomed to that, and you'd assume regarding that in comparison, Mike, Anna, and Patricia, ex-in-laws, that law firm was fired. Because I actually knew better the whole time. But why would anybody actually believe me At what point in time is there enough verification and clarifications? Because they were fired, and I didn't want any involvement because I actually knew what I was doing. So, in reference to the official Joe Rogan Experience YouTube channel where he's talking with Timothy Pool, well, Timothy, my neighbor across the street, we would know this because we had seen it in our neighborhood. And so, when those types, I wrote about this in a different capacity. Psycho acts. No, I don't want you back. No, I'm not interested, will interest lawyer. I'm not interested at all. Whatsoever. That's just the facts. I wasn't interested. It's my work. So my finances should be my finances without any issues. But see, will and trust lawyers, when they don't just get to the point, and they leave things out in the open, and they're just like, oh, well, that's the problem with that schmoozing crap. Where instead of just being like, this is what the meeting is about, and this is this, and this, so that way it's not anything else on the, because what would be going on? Well, common sense. But those types of will and trust lawyers also know that, they get to live off the interest instead. Because if they were to actually do what was best, they wouldn't waste someone's time. I do what I can not to waste time. I'm not looking to, especially when it comes to a law firm. This is business. So when those types do certain things, where they just want to, well, here, let's sit down and talk, and why don't you let me know what I actually need to know in comparison to wasting my time? Why don't you just do that instead of stirring up needless drama? Because that's what you do when you do that stuff. In my opinion, those types, they just realistically have been so annoying in that capacity. Where people, and then they've taught their little trust fund babies to be that way. Where, no, you need to be off to the side, instead of teaching them etiquette and respect and to be blunt and to the point. Instead. But there are those who know about those particular situations I dealt with. So, as far as having gone across the country and taking care of stuff and doing what I could, where I could, and all those capacities of, it's one of those, I haven't played games, I haven't hidden, I've been honest, and it's one of those, I just haven't been capable to understand why but if there are those will and trust lawyer types, having needlessly involved themselves, I hope their insurance coverages go and audit them for that. Because that sort of stuff, as far as if there's any involvement as to what my son, my daughter, and I dealt with, needlessly, because of those will and trust type or whatever, that were fired. Absolutely. In person, face to face. I went to the office and fired them. Don't know what the problem is at that point. If there's any involvement regarding that will and trust law firm type. Because if it was because he threw a temper tantrum. The lawyer actually threw a temper tantrum as to what I had. And so the reality, though, is, additionally, once my house and once the finances from the insurance were gone, that will and trust law firm, even after I already retracted them, that was it. Because that was the only thing that was put in as far as the legal paperwork. It was only in reference to the Prudential account, specifically, and only in reference to my Carrollton house. That was it. So if that will and trust law firm, as far as how long it took for me to sell my house, and they didn't think that I was as serious of a mom as I am, well, I guess they learned. But they also would have known that that was the end. Because the day that I sold that house, aside from having retracted and fired that law firm, legally, the day I sold that house and the day I closed out my account, they no longer had any rights to my son, my daughter, and I, on top of already having been fired. They were officially out. Legally. And so if they didn't know that, well, then there's that problem. If they involved themselves with my biological mother, biological father, biological sister, and or ex-in-laws, there's that, because of those types. And so they already were removed. But that would require people to actually, ask me instead of assuming. Because I've, especially more recently, I haven't ever asked. See, unlike what trust fund babies would do, a trust fund baby would contact the law firm and have the law firm do it. I didn't do that. I contacted the law firm and told them they were fired. So, there is that. So those needless problems that I've dealt with, what proof? What is the legal recourse for myself, as well as my daughter and my son, to what in the hypotheticals of? As well as then regarding my Medal of Honor Art Project trips, my Medal of Honor Art Project artwork, my books, my website, my social media, what at that point, when flat out had fired the will and trust lawyers. They're fired. Automatically. So why would there be any involvement in that hypothetical? And when having officially, if there was any issues caused by them, again, specifically goes to their breach of contract. That would also be where they endangered two minors, regarding my son and my daughter, their violation of Americans with Disabilities Act, automatically additionally, involving themselves with stuff that was not for them to involve themselves with, and etc. So how many trust fund babies have had that sort of needless problem because of those types? And what proof would those be capable to find out on their own? I look forward to that merger. It's only a little over a month away now. Because now, it's the 1st of May, 2022. And so, in the additional factors to that official Joe Rogan experience, interview with Timothy Pool, having driven across the country, I wonder what has actually been seen, because I've seen a few things and I've dealt with a few situations. So there's the modern day book, I would guesstimate, as far as some of the stuff seen, such as in Great Falls, Montana, and Arco, Idaho are two examples. Then there's the San Juan Islands and stuff like that. A few other situations. But then, I just think that would be interesting in those regards. Because I remember Timothy from, in regards to New Jersey, and, he got into vehicles. And so it was as it was. If I remember correctly, the last time when he was on Facebook that I had seen him, I can't remember where I think he was in Florida maybe, which was funny because it would have been funny if he had found out that I landed at the bottom of the ocean and surfaced life. But he would definitely be one individual who would be like, yeah, I know for a fact I would guess he would because of the whirlpool in the backyard. That would be one of many reasons. So anyway, you guys have a good day. Like, share, and subscribe to my official YouTube channel. Go to my website, www.susanmailing.com.